Hello everyone. In this session, I will be going over the Postman scripts to test the API and write the integration test. If you have not watched the last session on Intro to API integration test, you can check it out in the description below. Okay, so let's jump right on it. I will be using a free API to test this to show the demo. And the API that I will be using is CADFAX. It's just easy, free to use. And obviously, you can use your own API, or if you're just practicing it, you can use the same API. It does not need any authorization key or anything. Now, let me show you the API first. And I found it using this start developing. You can go over here, and this is the API. You can see it's deployed on Heroku, so it's free to use. I will copy this. First, let's see what this API is. I will add this, and the first endpoint is /fax. So I will just type /fax. It's a GET request, and let's send the request. Okay, so you can see I have the response. Now first, in order to test our API, we need to understand the JSON object, what we are getting, so that we can basically validate it. And I'll show you this in a proper JSON formatter so that we can understand the JSON object from here. So I'll minimize everything, all the objects. Okay, so this is an array, and in this response, we are getting basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 objects. And let's just try to understand one object because all the JSON properties will be similar. So first is status object, status as a JSON object, which has 3 different params. And then its type, which is a string, deleted, it should be a Boolean value. Then ID, user, text, these are all string. Version is integer. And similarly, you can like see and validate and try to understand what all of the parameters correspond to, whether it's a string type, integer, Boolean, or something else. Because what we want to validate is in API integration testing is that first, all our parameters are there or not. Why? Because in the client, you would have written the code to expect a specific parameter, to get the value of that parameter. And in the response, if you don't get that value, your code might break. So that is the first use case, to verify whether all the properties that are mandatory are there or not. Then second would be whether the type of the response is correct or not. Whether if it's a Boolean type, whether you are getting a Boolean, or if it's an integer type, you're getting an integer. So that in future, like someone changes integer to string, then it should give you a crash on the client side. So you want to prevent that. Now let's see how we write this in the Postman. We'll come to Postman, and first we have already verified that our API gives the correct response. Now we will go to the test section. Over here you will see the results. Oh, we will go to test section on this side. I'll reduce the size of this. On the right side, you will see that Postman has already given some snippets, and most probably it will be suffice to just use these snippets. If we need, we will modify some of the snippets as well. Now, the first use case in every API integration test that you should always write is it's always that whether you're getting a response code 200 or not, or whatever you need your API to return, whether you're getting that or not, whether it's a successful API or not. So this is a snippet, and you can basically run it. We don't have to make any changes in this. It will run as is. And now if I send my command get API, you will see that this test result, it passed. We have one test case and one passed. So this is the name of the test. You can change it to whatever you want. Now, the second test case that we want to validate is the schema of our JSON as we discussed earlier. Now, schema is this part. Use tiny validator for JSON data because we are validating the JSON data. we'll just import this. Now, in order to run this test, let's understand what this test is basically doing. So we have a schema of one JSON object. It should be of type Boolean. And then this is a sample. We will change it to our own needs. And then the sample is, we have two datas. One is Boolean Boolean and one is Boolean integer, right? Now, what we will do is we will change the schema and its expectation according to our needs. So first thing that we need is, we will delete this, and the first thing that we need is schema for our JSON. And where is our JSON? In the body. So we will copy this JSON and we will try to get the JSON schema for this. Now you can get it online. If you want, you can write it on your own, but getting it online, there are many tools that can give you that. So you can just go here. The first link that I got is Liquid Technologies. You can simply refer to that and you paste your JSON over here and you will get your JSON schema down below. So you copy this JSON schema and you put it in the schema definition over here. You can also delete this. We'll just need to add a semicolon over here. So in order to understand what this JSON schema is doing is, first we saw that it is a type array, the whole JSON. Then status is an object which has three properties. One is verified, one is sent count, and one is feedback, and it's their types are written over here. Similarly, all these three are required. Then you have type, you have deleted of Boolean type, you have ID of string type. That's why we understood the JSON schema first before adding, we understood the JSON before getting onto the JSON schema. So you can change any of the schema based on your own needs. Uh, it is just a high level overview. Now moving on, what do we need to validate? Of course, we don't need this data because data we will get from our response, because what we are trying to validate is this response against this schema. Okay, so how do we write this test is, let me change the name and say test cat facts. And this is basically a JavaScript object. So you can, if you are familiar with JavaScript, you can write any code. What I'll do is I'll take the variable called and call it result. And this TV4 is a Postman defined variable. And what it does is it will validate your data. So we'll say validate result. And what is the result that we want to validate is PM is Postman dot response. We take the JSON format. Against what? We want to validate it against the schema, right? And semicolon. Now we have the result. You can log the result if you want to verify, but it's not needed. But if the result, we'll say if result dot valid. If it is not valid, then we'll write it. Then we will put it to console, or else we don't need to put it on console. Right? And then we'll just say expect result.valid to be true. And we don't need this line. Okay, let's just understand what we did over here. So first step, we got the schema. We got the schema, and now we have to validate this, our response against the schema. So what we are doing is we are basically validating. If it is not a valid response, then we log it, or else we just say that it should be true. Now let's run the test again. And you should see it failed. Let's see why. Validate is not defined. Okay, so either, okay, let's just say, oh, over here, validate. On this side, we should say result.valid. Okay, let's try to run again. Okay, now it passed. So what our schema is, what we got from that free tool, and it says that it should have all these properties. Verified should be of type boolean, send count should be an integer. Now let's just change send count. I can show you again. Our send count was 1, which is an integer, and now if somehow uh, team started sending it as a string, our result should fail. This is just like, this will be a negative type, but just to show it as a failure, I'll show you in this way. This test should fail. Expected false to be true. And now you can see in the console as well, invalid type number, expected a string. So that's how it works. So why it says expecting string? Because in the schema, it says it is expecting a string, but it found what? Number. So we'll change it to integer. And this is how we can write our API integration test. You can obviously change or add any more use cases that you want. So the two test cases that we ran is, first is the status code is 200 or not, and then second, if the schema is valid or not. Now I can show one more part. You can consider that for some, one second, let me remove this. Okay, now consider if you don't get the verified property, right? Let's say it's not verified. Now I'm saying that verified is a required, but if the verified property is not a required property, it's not a mandatory property, you can remove it from here and then it should be fine. Then later on, when you have like a couple of your test cases, you can simply save it and put it in your collection. Put this in your collection so that you can run all of this in one go. And imagine that you have like 10 different test cases that you're running. You can simply run it in single go. So all the test cases, however you want, you will have all the test cases and their response over here. And you can see the summary that you ran this, it passed, and everything like that. So this is about how we write API integration scripts in using Postman. You can do that for your API calls. You can do that for your GraphQL calls. The process is same. The schema should be same because it's a JSON. And let me know if you have any confusion or if you want me to show any specific example of your API. We can definitely work on that. I'll come up again with the next tutorial, next part for this. And in that, we will be covering the Karate integration test. Okay, thank you everyone. Have a good day.